Hey guys, I'm J-Man, and today I'll be talking about this portal axle from AliExpress, but I'll also be giving you some tips and tricks to fit any portal axle on any crawler, so it's not as straightforward as you may think it is. So let's dive straight into it. So guys, if you're unsure what a portal axle is, well, that's an axle where the actual axle here is not in line with the wheel axle, as you see. This one is lower, and therefore you raise ground clearance. So ideally you want to make sure that the height between the pumpkin and the ground is as high as possible, and that's why these axles are offset, so that the pumpkin is raised from the ground to give you more ground clearance here. Now in these axles, the extra clearance versus a normal axle is approximately 1.3 centimeters. That's, you can see it approximately there. Now this 1.3 centimeters may not seem like a lot, but it actually is. It makes sure that you cannot simply fit these axles to any standard SCX10. Well, you could, but then the stance is not okay. Because what you're effectively doing then is, sure, you gain ground clearance at the pumpkins, which is great and all, but also you raise your center of gravity. Because if you keep your shocks mounted in the same position and everything, then actually your body and everything, your whole chassis, will be 1.3 centimeters higher off the ground, which you really don't want, because a high center of gravity means it tips over way more easy from inside during side hilling and also up hills and down hills, so you really don't want that. Now, there's of course a way around it. And it will depend on your vehicle if it will be difficult to do, yes or no. In my case, I actually made a new chassis for it, because as you can see, my shocks are already mounted on the highest position, meaning that lowered my vehicle already as much as I could lower it. And still I had the problem that the center of gravity was way too high. So I made a new chassis. And actually I can compare it to the original chassis. So this is what I did. This is my original chassis, and the stainless steel one I have on right now is one I custom made for this build. Now you can see that the bumper position remained the same versus the original chassis. Also, the mounting points for the gearbox remained the same, and the mounting points for the front bumper also remained at the same height. But the hoops, where the shocks are mounted to, or the shock mounts even are mounted on, those are raised, as you can see, and they're raised approximately the same amount as the 1.3 centimeters that the portals have in them. And this allows for actually the shock towers to come higher, meaning that the chassis, everything will drop with 1.3 centimeters. So keeping your center of gravity the same as it used to be. You could also just mount your shocks higher if yours are not in the highest position already. But at a certain moment you start to lose shock travel and everything as well if you put shorter shocks on there and everything like that. So I decided to just make a new chassis for this one. What this also allows is that my servo, which is mounted to my axle, neatly gets tucked in if the vehicle goes in full compression of the dampers. You see, and this was not able if I wouldn't have raised this portion of the chassis to raise the shock towers, because then the servo would have hit the underside of my chassis there. And now it just doesn't hit there. The shocks can bottom out first before the servo hits anything. First things first, so let's put these things on the scale. They weigh in at around 353 grams. That's with the gearing inside, without any servo of course, and without any hubs on the axles. The steering angle on these is around 45 degrees, but actually it binds up right there at 45 degrees. So I recommend you only stick to 40 degrees of steering angle, because that's just before the binding happens. So the gear ratio on these axles is just the same as you would have your standard SCX10 II axle. And that's only coming from the gear ratio between the pinion and the ring of the diff here. Because in the portals there's actually no reduction here. So see, these are the gears that are in the portals. So they're inside like that, two of them, but they're exactly the same. So yeah, don't expect any extra reduction. Guys, all the bolts on this are just plain steel. There's nothing stainless here, so I recommend the first thing you do, take out all the bolts, replace them by stainless ones, or they will get red from rust during your first water encounter. These are M2.5, these as well, and all the rest of the screws or bolts is M3. Now these axles have splined ends, so if you take out this bolt from there, you can just pull this off and then reposition it to adjust the camber on your vehicle. I really like that. So, and then you just put the bolt back in and tighten it up. Now the whole axle has ball bearings everywhere except for the kingpins. So there, the hinge where it where the steering happens, there is just a copper bushing with a screw through it like that. So, it's not ideal. Actually, in mine I replaced these bushings with some bearings. If you search for bearings with the outer diameter of 6 and inner diameter of 3 millimeters, they will fit here, and then it tightens up the play, so it gets rid of it. Now the diff in these is just a straight through, so as you can see there. And this output, you can, it's off center, you see, this is more upwards now, and you can rotate it to fit like this as well. It's just like the standard SCX10 axles. If you want to rotate it, however, then you also need to rotate this 180 degrees, let's say. Otherwise the gear mesh won't mesh. Now the durability on these, well, what can I say? I have these on my rig for already quite some time, as you can see, both front and rear, and I actually really like them. I've already done miles and miles of abuse with them, and they haven't let me down so far. The thing that's now wearing down really badly, let's say, is that universal joint over there. That's the weak spot, I would say. Also, this is the one that gets most debris. All the rest is pretty sealed, let's say, from water and dirt, but this one's quite open, so dirt gets in, and then it starts grinding, and that's where it will wear out. But fortunately, you can buy the spare shafts for this. One more thing, guys. These ball joints here, they actually are poor quality. So I suggest replacing those as soon as you get the axles. Because as you can see, or maybe cannot see, but in my case, to get the wheels to be parallel with each other, left and right, I needed this bar to be a bit longer than it is now, so I needed to unthread this connection here a bit, meaning that you don't have many threads left anymore there, and then it just ripped out on the first decent steering movement that I had to do with the vehicle. So there you have it, guys. That concludes my review of the portal axle from AliExpress. To conclude, I like it, but you need to modify your chassis to make it fit. You need to change the rod ends, and you need to replace the screws by stainless steel ones, unless if you don't mind rusting all over the place. So guys, if you liked it, please hit the like and the subscribe button. In one of the next videos I'll be covering how I built this, so the specifics of these. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.